I woke that morning to a silence that felt wrong, a stillness in our house that made my skin crawl before I even opened my eyes. Our family home was never completely quiet, but that morning the silence felt absolute, as if I were the only living thing in the world. When I turned to look at Yam's sleeping mat, my heart stopped. The woven mat was empty, her blanket thrown back carelessly, as if she had left in a hurry or been pulled away suddenly. I sat up quickly, looking around our small house for any sign of where she might have gone. The front door stood open, and a cool breeze moved through our home, carrying with it the scent of night-blooming flowers and something else. Something that made my stomach clench with instinctive fear. "Yam?" I called softly, not wanting to wake the rest of the family if this was just a simple case of my sister stepping outside for a moment. But even as I spoke her name, I knew something was terribly wrong. Yam was not the type of child to leave the house alone in the darkness, especially not without telling someone where she was going. I rose from my sleeping mat and walked toward the open door, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor. As I reached the threshold, I could see into the forest that bordered our village, and what I saw there made my blood turn to ice. There, barely visible among the ancient trees, was a figure in white clothing, standing perfectly still as if waiting for something or someone. The figure was too far away for me to see clearly, but something about its posture, its stillness, its very presence in the forest at this hour, filled me with a dread so profound that I had to grip the door frame to keep from falling. I knew, with a certainty that bypassed rational thought, that this figure was connected to Yam's disappearance, and I knew with equal certainty that I had to go into that forest to find my sister, no matter how much every instinct I possessed screamed at me to stay in the safety of our home. Therefore, I grabbed a shawl from beside the door and stepped into the pre-dawn darkness, beginning a journey that would teach me that some things are older than our prayers and hungrier than our fear. The forest at night was a completely different world from the peaceful place Yam and I walked through each morning. The familiar path that had seemed so safe and welcoming in daylight now felt treacherous and alive with unseen threats. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound could signal something unnatural moving through the darkness. I had brought no light with me except the faint glow of the moon filtering through the thick canopy above. The ancient trees that had seemed protective during our daily walks now loomed over me like silent giants, their massive trunks disappearing into darkness above and their roots creating obstacles that threatened to trip me with every step. But I pressed forward, driven by a fear for Yam's safety that was stronger than my terror of the forest at night. She was my responsibility, and whatever had drawn her from our home in the darkness, I would find her and bring her back safely. Returning home without her, having to tell our parents that I had failed to protect her was unthinkable. As I walked deeper into the forest, following the path that led toward the spirit shrine, I began to hear something that made my steps falter. It was singing, a woman's voice carrying a melody through the night air, beautiful and haunting and somehow familiar. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing off the trees and filtering down through the leaves like moonlight made audible. The melody was the same one that Yam had been humming the evening before, the strange song she claimed to have learned from nowhere, that felt ancient and otherworldly. But hearing it sung in the darkness by an invisible voice filled me with a terror so profound that I had to stop walking and lean against a tree trunk to keep from collapsing. Therefore, when I finally reached the spirit shrine and saw what was waiting for me there, I was already prepared for something beyond the ordinary world, something that would challenge everything I thought I knew about the boundaries between life and death. What I saw at the spirit shrine that night will haunt me until the day I die. Yam stood before the ancient structure perfectly still, as if she were carved from the same stone as the shrine's ancient figures. But it wasn't just her presence there that filled me with terror. It was the fact that she seemed to be glowing with the same pale light that emanated from the shrine itself. Beside her stood the woman we had encountered that morning, but now there was no pretense of humanity about her appearance. She was translucent, clearly visible but obviously not of this world, her red traditional dress seeming to float around her rather than hang from her body. Her face wore the same too wide smile, but now it seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of human anatomy, revealing teeth that gleamed like polished bone in the supernatural light. The woman was singing, her voice carrying the haunting melody that had been stuck in Yam's head since our morning encounter. But hearing it sung by this otherworldly figure in this sacred place at this unholy hour, I understood that the song was not just a melody but a summoning, a call that had drawn my sister from the safety of our home into the domain of forces beyond human understanding. Yam, I called softly, afraid to speak too loudly in this place where the normal rules seemed suspended. Yam, it's time to come home. But my sister didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge my presence. She continued to stand motionless before the shrine, her eyes fixed on something I couldn't see, her face wearing an expression of rapture that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The supernatural woman turned her attention to me then, and when our eyes met, I felt as if I were falling into an abyss of ancient hunger and malevolent intelligence. You are the protective sister. You love her very much. That love will make what comes next so much more satisfying. I wanted to run, every survival instinct I possessed screaming at me to flee this place and these creatures that wore familiar forms but carried alien intentions. But I couldn't leave Yam, couldn't abandon her to whatever fate this supernatural entity had planned. Let her go, I said, my voice stronger than I felt, drawing on reserves of courage I didn't know I possessed. Whatever you want, take it from me instead. She's just a child. The supernatural woman laughed, a sound like wind chimes made of broken glass, beautiful and cutting at the same time. Oh, but she is so much more than just a child. She has the gift, the sensitivity that allows her to hear the old songs, to see beyond the veil that blinds most mortals to our existence. She is exactly what we have been waiting for, what we have been calling to through dreams and whispers, and the ancient melodies that echo in the spaces between worlds. The woman moved closer to Yam, her translucent form seeming to flow rather than walk. For generations, your family has honored us with offerings and respect, has maintained the shrine and kept the old agreements. Now it is time for a deeper connection, a more intimate relationship between our realms. I felt sick with understanding. This wasn't a random supernatural encounter. It was the culmination of something that had been building for generations, a debt or agreement that my family had unknowingly inherited along with our traditions and beliefs. What do you want from her? I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. She will be our bridge, the woman replied, her smile growing impossibly wider. Through her, we will taste the world of the living again. We'll remember what it feels like to have flesh and blood and beating hearts. She will carry us with her wherever she goes, and we will experience life through her eyes, her thoughts, and her dreams. And in return, she will gain knowledge that no living person has ever possessed, will see truths that are hidden from mortal understanding, will become something far greater than any university education could ever make her. The woman's voice carried a seductive quality, as if she were offering a gift rather than describing a violation. But I could see what this gift was doing to my sister. Yam's face had lost all expression, all personality, all trace of the bright, curious girl who had shared breakfast with our family just hours before. She stood like a beautiful statue, alive but not living, present but not truly there. Therefore, I did the only thing I could think of. I began to pray to the Buddhist principles that formed the foundation of our spiritual understanding, and to the ancestor spirits that our family had honored for generations. I prayed with every ounce of faith and desperation I possessed. I prayed for Yam's soul, for her freedom from whatever force had claimed her, for the strength to bring her home safely to the family that loved her more than life itself. And for a moment it seemed to work. The supernatural woman's form began to flicker and fade, her too wide smile wavering as if my prayers were creating interference with her connection to our world. The unnatural glow around the shrine dimmed, and the oppressive atmosphere that had made breathing difficult began to lift. Yam blinked, her eyes focusing for the first time since I had found her at the shrine. She looked around in confusion, as if waking from a deep dream, and when she saw me standing there in my nightclothes, her face crumpled with relief and fear. "Sister," she said, her voice small and uncertain. "How did I get here? I was sleeping, and then I was walking, but I don't remember deciding to leave the house." I rushed to her side and wrapped my arms around her, feeling the solid warmth of her body and the steady beating of her heart. She was real, she was alive, she was herself again. "It's all right," I whispered, though I wasn't sure anything would ever be all right again. "You're safe now. Let's go home." But as we turned to leave the shrine, the supernatural woman's voice followed us, no longer beautiful but filled with a malevolence that made the forest itself seem to recoil.
This is not over, protective sister. The child has heard our song, has tasted our realm. She belongs to us now, and we will not be denied what is rightfully ours. You can take her home, you can surround her with your mortal love and protection, but she will return to us. They always do, once they have heard the calling. The old agreements cannot be broken by prayer or love or any force in the mortal realm.
The voice faded as we hurried along the path toward home, but its words echoed in my mind with the weight of prophecy. Therefore, as we emerged from the forest and saw our village sleeping peacefully in the pre-dawn darkness, I knew that we had won only a temporary victory, and that the real battle for my sister's soul was just beginning. By the time we reached our house, the rest of our family was awake and frantic with worry. Mother was standing in the doorway, her face pale with fear, while father searched the area around our home with a lantern. Our younger brother stood nearby, clearly frightened by the unusual commotion in the pre-dawn hours. "Yam! Malee!" Mother cried when she saw us approaching. "Where have you been?" "We woke up and found you both gone, the door open. We thought something terrible had happened." She rushed to embrace us both, her hands shaking as she checked us for injuries or signs of harm. Father approached more slowly, his expression serious and concerned. "What happened?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who expected a complete and honest answer. "Why did you leave the house in the darkness? You know how dangerous it is to walk in the forest at night." I looked at Yam, hoping she would be able to explain what had drawn her from our home, but she seemed as confused as our parents. "I don't remember leaving," she said, her voice small and uncertain. I was sleeping, and then I was at the shrine, but I don't know how I got there. You were sleepwalking, Mother said, relief evident in her voice as she found a rational explanation for the frightening events. You must have been having a vivid dream that caused you to walk in your sleep. It happens sometimes, especially to children who are under stress or excitement. Father nodded, accepting this explanation because it made sense within the framework of normal human experience. The important thing is that you're both safe, he said. But from now on, we'll make sure to secure the door more carefully at night. We can't have family members wandering off in their sleep. But I knew it hadn't been sleepwalking. I had seen the supernatural woman at the shrine, had heard her voice making claims about ancient agreements and otherworldly connections. I had witnessed something that existed outside the boundaries of rational explanation, something that threatened not just Yam's physical safety but her very soul. However, how could I tell my parents that their youngest had been claimed by something beyond our world, that the traditions they taught us to revere had left her open to what lies beyond understanding? How could I explain that our obedience to the old ways had attracted beings who treat human life as entertainment? Therefore, I remained silent about what I had really seen at the shrine, allowing my parents to believe in the comforting lies of sleepwalking rather than confronting them with the truth that would shatter their understanding of the world and their ability to protect their children. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and for a few precious hours, it seemed as if the previous night's events had been nothing more than a shared nightmare. Yam woke at her usual time, helped with breakfast preparation, and showed no signs of remembering her midnight journey to the forest shrine. Our parents treated the incident as a one-time occurrence, a strange but explainable event that required only practical precautions to prevent repetition. But I noticed changes in my sister that filled me with growing unease. Her appetite, usually healthy and enthusiastic, had diminished to the point where she barely touched her food. When Mother asked if she was feeling ill, Yam insisted she was fine, but I could see the dark circles under her eyes and the way her clothes seemed to hang more loosely on her frame. More disturbing was the way she would sometimes stop in the middle of conversations, her eyes growing distant as if she were listening to something the rest of us couldn't hear. When we asked what had captured her attention, she would shake her head and claim it was nothing, but I could see the confusion and fear in her expression. The melody that had haunted her thoughts the day before had not disappeared. If anything, it seemed to have grown stronger, more insistent. I would catch her humming it while she worked, while she studied, even while she slept. And each time I heard those haunting notes, I felt the same chill of supernatural dread that had filled me at the shrine. Therefore, when it came time for our daily walk to school, I suggested that we take a different path, one that would avoid the forest shrine entirely. But Yam insisted on taking our usual route, claiming that changing our routine would only make our parents more worried about the previous night's incident. As we approached the spirit shrine on our way to school that morning, I felt my anxiety building with every step. The place that had been the site of supernatural terror just hours before now appeared completely normal in the bright morning light. The ancient carvings stood in their eternal poses, fresh offerings of flowers and incense left by early rising villagers, and birds sang in the branches overhead as if nothing unusual had ever occurred. But Yam's behavior as we neared the shrine filled me with alarm. Her pace slowed, then stopped entirely, and she stood staring at the ancient structure with an expression of longing that seemed completely inappropriate for a 14-year-old girl looking at a religious monument. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, her voice carrying a dreamy quality that I had never heard before. "The way the light falls through the trees, the way the carvings seem to move when you look at them from different angles. It's like the whole shrine is alive, like it's breathing with the rhythm of the forest itself." I felt my heart sink as I listened to her words. This wasn't the way Yam had ever talked about the shrine before. Throughout our childhood, she had shown appropriate respect for the sacred place, but never this kind of fascination, never this sense of personal connection. "Come on," I said, taking her arm gently. "We need to get to school. We're already running late because of last night's incident." But Yam resisted my attempt to guide her away from the shrine. "Just a moment longer," she said. "I want to leave a proper offering, something special to thank the spirits for watching over me during my sleepwalking." She approached the shrine and knelt before it, but instead of leaving a simple flower as she had always done before, she reached into her school bag and withdrew something that made my blood run cold. It was a small wooden carving, intricately detailed, depicting a figure in traditional dress with arms outstretched in welcome or supplication. "Where did you get that?" I asked, my voice sharp with alarm. I had never seen the carving before, and I was certain it hadn't been in Yam's possession the previous day. "I made it," she said simply, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Last night, after we came home, I couldn't sleep, so I found some wood and carved this. My hands seem to know exactly what to do, even though I've never carved anything before in my life." The carving was beautiful, but there was something deeply unsettling about its craftsmanship. The detail was far beyond anything a novice could have created, and the figure it depicted bore an unmistakable resemblance to the supernatural woman we had encountered. Therefore, as Yam placed the carving among the other offerings at the shrine, I knew that whatever force had claimed her attention was far from finished with our family, and that the supernatural encounter at the shrine had been only the beginning of something much larger and more terrifying than I could imagine. As we finally continued on our way to school, leaving the shrine and its new offering behind, I tried to convince myself that everything would return to normal once we got away from that place of supernatural power. But Yam's behavior during the remainder of our walk filled me with growing dread. She hummed constantly now, the haunting melody that had become her constant companion, but her humming was accompanied by words in a language I didn't recognize. When I asked her what she was singing, she looked at me with surprise as if she hadn't realized she was making any sound at all. "I don't know," she said. "The words just feel right, like they belong with the melody. They're beautiful, aren't they? They tell a story about coming home after a long journey, about finding the place where you truly belong." But the words she was singing didn't sound like any language spoken by living people. They carried harmonics and tonal qualities that seemed to resonate in my bones, that made my teeth ache and my vision blur around the edges. By the time we reached the school, I was desperate to get away from the forest, from the shrine, from whatever influence was growing stronger around my sister with each passing moment. But as I prepared to leave Yam at the school entrance and begin my solitary walk home, she grabbed my hand with a grip that was surprisingly strong. "Don't leave me," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "I can feel her watching me, waiting for me to be alone. please don't leave me by myself." The desperation in her voice broke my heart, but it also confirmed my worst fears. Whatever had happened at the shrine had created a connection that distance couldn't break, a supernatural bond that would continue to influence my sister no matter where she went or how far she traveled from the forest. Therefore, I made a decision that would change the course of our family's life forever. Instead of leaving Yam at school and returning home as I had planned, I decided to stay with her, to become her constant companion and protector against forces that I didn't understand but could no longer deny. But as I settled in to wait outside her classroom, watching through the window as she tried to focus on her lessons, I realized that love and determination might not be enough to save her from whatever ancient hunger had awakened and marked her as its own. The supernatural woman had been right about one thing. Some connections once made cannot be broken by mortal means. And as I watched my beloved sister struggle against forces beyond human understanding, I began to understand that our family was about to face a battle that would test everything we believed about the power of love, tradition, and faith to protect those we cherish most.